Welcome to the Tai Chi Chuan podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This is a bi-weekly podcast where my friend Jess O'Brien and I discuss internal martial arts, Qigong, and meditation. In this episode, we're going to continue our discussion of the Wu style of Tai Chi Chuan and keep looking at the 1987 Tai Chi Chuan magazine article with Bruce Frantzis. In this one, we get into a little bit more about the healing aspects of the Wu style of Tai Chi, which then leads into a little bit more of a discussion about Liu Hongji's Tai Chi. In the extended episode on the Patreon, we go into a longer discussion about martial arts, and I talk a little bit about mixed martial arts versus traditional martial arts. Then we return to Bai Hua's book and continue with the Tai Chi classics. We are nearing the end of the Tai Chi Chuan Lun, where Bai Hua does a summary of the core concepts that has been covered so far. And in our latest Patreon episode, we continue our discussion of the Taoist meditation from Qi magazine. And we begin talking about dissolving emotions and higher levels of energy. We also talk a bit about the internal organs and the glands and the role they play when you're doing meditation and how they play into the emotional stuff. So hope you enjoy that. Check out the Facebook and the Instagram for images to go along with the episodes. Thanks again for listening. Take care of yourselves and be well.
In today's episode, we're going to keep looking at the Wu style of Tai Chi from this October 1987 Tai Chi magazine article by Kumar Francis. So the next thing he talks about is the internal energy and healing aspect of Wu style Tai Chi. He says many Tai Chi Chuan people in the West equate relaxation with soft energy. In classic Tai Chi Chuan terms, this is only partially accurate. Relaxation, or the releasing of all accumulated tension in the nerves, muscles, and joints, is the essential foundation for both soft and hard energy. Without relaxation, neither can be produced. However, relaxation is just one of several components of these energies. Soft and hard energies are specific qualities of internal energy that are produced through different methods. In order to develop martial skill in Tai Chi Chuan, one must completely develop and combine the two energies. This combination is known in Chinese as Gong Rou Xiang Ji. The Wu style is based on the principle of Rou Chu Gong, first producing soft energy and from that producing hard energy. The Yang and Chen styles mostly work in the opposite direction, producing soft from hard, or Gong Chu Rou. So I thought that was pretty interesting, this idea that we've been talking about along the way, this idea that Wu Chuanyu, the founder of the Wu style of Tai Chi, he learned from his master Yang Luchan both the hard and soft energetic techniques, and his specialty was, combining them together to really keep his opponent confused. And so his style of Tai Chi produces the hard from first beginning with mastering the soft side, of which relaxation is just the beginning. That's an interesting way to go. Usually you spend some years in more hard style just to get some fighting and, strength under your belt. Then as you get older, you focus more on trying to find that soft power.
Well, that's essentially what it is. It's just doing it in the same martial art, right? So like, if you're young, you're going to develop, you start by developing the yang hard power, right? You get big stances, hard energy. You learn the techniques as a martial art. You learn how to doing it for your health, and you can still do the martial arts as long as you're healthy, and that's kind of nice. And then when you get older, it's like, well, if you get pressured, you might still do the martial arts, but mostly you're just concerned with like prolonging your life, right, and increasing the quality of it, right? Like making those last years comfortable as opposed to shitty. And, right. So I think that's where something like Tai Chi, the advantage is that it can be all of those things. You don't have to learn one thing in your youth, and then another thing in your 30s, and then another thing in your 50s. It's like you can just do the same thing in a slightly different way. And that's a really, big time saver as far as it all goes.
Definitely. He makes a distinction here. Wu style starts with soft energy to create hard. It's just, they're both Tai Chi energies. So what would you say is a characteristic when you're learning Tai Chi, learning this Wu style? What would be one of those elements that say, I'm going to develop soft power first before the harder, stronger ones of Yang style, maybe?
The 8 basic techniques, right? Or even just the 4 primary ones. You're going to focus more on the 2 yin ones and less on the 2 yang ones. Right. And then when you
roll
get
back and
then when
press.
you get it right, and then when you get into the other 4, again, you're going to focus on the more yin combinations and less yang combinations. I mean, you'll still do the yang ones, but it's like you'd be doing like a 70-30 towards the yin side, right? Where if you're trying to develop yang power, it's going to be the other way. It's going to be
Hung
more
and G are going to be high on your list. So he says both of these principles come from the concept of I Ching, the book of changes, that when yang reaches fullness, it produces yin, and when yin reaches fullness, it naturally produces yang. Since the Wu style in the beginning totally emphasizes the development of soft energy, it is particularly useful as a health and healing system. My Wu style teacher, the late Liu Hongzhi, studied and lived with Wu Jianchuan and his 2 sons in the 1930s. Liu has practiced martial arts from the time he was 12 until his death last year when he was in his 80s. He continually emphasized that soft energy was the most effective internal energy for longevity, healing illness and injuries, and making a weak constitution strong. It is soft energy that is the most useful for those who lead sedentary lives and do mental work rather than physical. For example, soft energy releases stress, allows insomniacs to regain normal sleep, and enables old or sick people to hold down their food. So that was a little interesting look at Liu Hongzhi apparently was pretty obsessed with this soft energy.
Well, that calligraphy that hangs in Bruce's training area says a bunch of stuff at the beginning, but the last line of it is basically that yin jing is the way, right? Yin energy is the Tao. And that was kind of his whole philosophy. I mean,
and that was Lao Tzu's way of finding the Tao. There could be other ways, but he had his watercourse way of being super yin, and through that way, the valley way, you find your way down to the Tao.
So, I mean, I think that it's a progression most of the time. I mean, very few people in their 20s are capable of being soft even when they're relaxed. You know, it's like their minds are just fucking, you know, like it takes a long time to develop that.
And he mentions white collar people who are in their heads and clenched up and tightened mentally. That soft energy might help break that up a little bit.
Well, I mean, just as a overall thing, I mean, soft energy heals the body, yang energy strengthens the body, right? So most people, their issue isn't lack of strength, their issue is that something is off, right? Something is not functioning properly, right? So
injury.
The yin approach is make sure everything is functioning properly first, then build up the power, right? The yang approach is build up the power, hoping that there's nothing wrong, you know, that you didn't know about. And then through that ability, you know, through the power that you've built up, your body becomes healthy and strong, right? But if there's some little thing in there that's off and you don't know about it, and you start making yourself really strong, that little, you know, that little thing that wouldn't have been a problem at your original power level grows and grows along with everything else, and it becomes a problem, right? So it's like you don't want the little monster inside to grow along with everything else, so you get rid of the little monsters and then you grow everything, and it that way they don't turn into big monsters later on.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's just a safety precaution more than anything else.
Well, he says here, one thing we've looked at, the life of Liu Hongzhi, and says that he studied and lived with Wu Jianchuan and his 2 sons in the 1930s. But we've been juggling the dates, trying to kind of figure out exactly where he was, or at least get a sense of where he was at what time period during the early 20th century.
Well, he met the sons in the early, or 32 to 34, when he was teaching at the Guoshugan, and then lived with Wu Jianchuan in Hong Kong in, I think, 38 or so.
Is that where we're putting it? Somewhere around there? So
Yeah,
towards
well,
the end of the 30s.
Beginning of World War II, basically.
A
So
lot of people were going to Hong Kong and southern China.
well, and Wu Jianchuan dies in 41, so it's got to be somewhere between when he met the sons and when Wu Jianchuan died. So it's not a big span of time. But he was only with Wu Jianchuan for 6 months or something like that. This was not an extended, multi-year thing. It was just,
it's not like it's an intensive training period.
He got there, he was an extremely talented guy. Wu taught him the form. They discussed, meditation and Neigong ad nauseum. And then Wu said, and then Leo helped him with some stuff. And then he left, and
it's not too long after that. We estimate around 39 or 40 is when he goes to his mountain retreat for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So his encounter with Wu Jianchuan must have been somewhere pretty shortly before that. And then he doesn't come back till 1949.
Yeah.
So next statement says here, so after the discussion of soft power, the article continues. Before studying Tai Chi Chuan, Liu Hongzhi was a Xingyi and Bai Hua master, which fully developed his hard internal energy. Hard energy will make you very strong, he would say to me. But if you are sick or injured, the practice of hard energy techniques will make your sickness or injury worse, although it may take 20 or 30 years before the effect becomes fully apparent. Often the long-term benefits or problems resulting from a particular form of practice are not what they seem to be in the beginning.
Well, that's key. I mean, that's where, these practices that seem quote unquote weak in the beginning, the soft things where you're, this investing in loss thing doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel, like you're winning, but, after you do it for a while, you start to, reap the benefits of it. I think the basic Tai Chi philosophy is that you have a limit to your yang potential. You don't have a limit to your yin potential. So it's because yin by its very nature can just will just recycle itself. Yang will pull itself apart, right? So this is that large space, small space that Bai Hua talked about way back in the beginning, right? That yang things have the tendency to rip apart and expand. Yin things have the tendency to come together and grow, right? So there are times when it is definitely necessary to add more juice to your system. I mean, that's for fact, but you have to temper it with that, that yin stuff, or it can bite you in the ass.
So he says, I believe that the Wu style's emphasis on developing soft energy, both mentally and physically, is the reason why Wu Jianchuan gained a tremendous reputation as a healer. In his teaching of the Wu style, Liu focused on soft energy, with its strong ability to relax the mind and heal the body. I think that was interesting because I hadn't heard of Wu Jianchuan having any reputation as a healer, but I haven't really, I can't read the Chinese sources, so I haven't hardly seen much about Wu Jianchuan, but I guess maybe in Hong Kong and southern China, he does have that reputation. And it has, and it's definitely Tai Chi hallmark to relax the mind. And maybe Wu style does have a special healing benefits due to Wu Jianchuan's influence.
I mean, I think Wu Jianchuan made some significant improvements, just my opinion, on the form. And I think Liu Hongzhi made some significant improvements on the form. I mean, and it's a lot, believe me, to say that, because you don't just do it on a whim, right? Same with Chen Manqing, right? Like, you don't practice Tai Chi for 2 or 5 or 10 years and decide, okay, I'm going to change it, unless you really know what the fuck you're doing. And, Liu Hongzhi, I think a lot of his conversations with Wu Jianchuan were about how do you take essentially Taoist Neigong, Taoist meditation, and apply that to Tai Chi. And that's wild stuff. But that's kind of where, I think that's where Wu Jianchuan and Liu Hongzhi had common interests. And so Liu took that knowledge that he had from 40 years of Bagua practice and his Neigong practice and his Taoist practice and all that, and he just put it all into this Wu style, because that was kind of his gift to Bruce. Was, okay, here's as much as I can put into one thing.
Seems like it, yeah. He just, his whole life's corpus of knowledge, he just pretty much just wove into his long form of Tai Chi and made that this just a comprehensive course in all of his stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a big undertaking.
Well, and it's again, it's the benefit of getting someone at the end of their life, much the way Liu did with Wu Jianchuan or with Ma Gui. You don't get everything, right? I mean, people always make a big deal about, well, I studied with him for 50 years and I got everything he knew. And that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to come in there super fucking on the ball and have the old man just, download the whole thing, and you just boom, and you get it, and it takes an exceptionally rare talent to do that. And I think that's,
right time and place. You've developed this all your life, and then you meet someone who's a mentor to you in a short time, can help you get a boost.
I mean, Wang Shengzai was another one, didn't train with Guoyuan Shen for very long, but he took that knowledge and he synthesized it into something different that ended up being as good as the original thing. Right. Again, I mean, I think a lot of people try to do this over the years, but most of them, it doesn't stick. A modern example would be Chen Pan Ling, right? I mean, he tried to do that with his form,
right?
To a certain degree of success, and so I don't know. I think it's just one approach to doing it is you don't go, okay, well, I'm just going to do it the way my daddy did it and never change it.
Sure.
But you actually come into it with some additional knowledge that you then sort of fold into it, which again can be good, can be not so good.
So he says, this is not to say that Wu style is not good for fighting and pushing hands. It most certainly is. However, all three Tai Chi Chuan styles are good for fighting and pushing hands. Each style has its own particular strong points. It's a myth that any particular Tai Chi Chuan style is superior for fighting. What's important is the personal kung fu of the individual practitioner. In fact, very few people fully develop the kung fu of any style of Tai Chi Chuan. It's extremely difficult to do so, and only a small number of any generation have the natural talent and perseverance to reach this pinnacle. So, I mean, that makes a good point. Tai Chi is not the easiest martial art to learn. I think it may be the easiest one to get benefits from, but it's not the easiest one to get all the benefits from. As a matter of fact, it might be one of the hardest.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know about easier or harder. It's I think it depends on your constitution, I mean, and that can change over time. And I think it's why you see a lot of people who do all three of the internal martial arts tend to kind of go through phases, and they might start with one and then get into another and then come back to it, or because it isn't a these things, like you said, it's dependent on the person, right? I mean, and your Xingyi or Bagua might be better than your Tai Chi based on a bunch of different factors, and your Tai Chi might be better than your Xingyi or Bagua based on a million different factors. But the main thing, what you're talking about in all those cases, is just your, as they would say, your gong fu, right? And like what is clear is Liu Hongzhi had massive amounts of gong fu that he was able to apply to any of these arts. And I think that's kind of for me, the real lesson in all that is trying to find that place where you're you're tapping into the raw material and the the different arts are just the container. It's like
Totally.
different shaped glasses
Yeah,
for your champagne.
and we're lucky in the internal schools to have access to Xingyi and Bagua as well. Like, there's just these other opportunities to learn skills that are similar and weave together. And like, I think the guys in that early 20th century who brought them together, I think it was smart. I mean, the downside is it's harder to learn 3 martial arts, but the upside is that you have all these other options and ways of exploring a lot of the same concepts. And, we'll see how it works out in the long term, but it's been working good for me.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I said before, I think a big part of its appeal is its versatility, right? That it can be all of these different things, and
so true.
It's just
so true. All right, so just to finish this part of the article, is the section on push hands and fighting. So talking about Wu style. Wu style pushing hands has the quality of emptiness, like pushing on water or air. It uses more or less the same techniques as Yang style push hands, but the Wu practitioner's hands remain soft and light even under continuous contact. That is unlike the typical Yang style pushing hands, where initial contact with the hands will be very soft, but underneath or under prolonged contact, the arms will be hard or heavy, and usually both. That's interesting. So he's taking the standard of having your hands remain, push on air, water, or air, super pliable, super giving, super yin in the push hands training. That's my experience in our, in the classes we've done with him pushing hands. Like, if you try to push on Kumar, his arms will give like an octopus. You're pushing into something just completely soft and squishy, that unless he decides to be real heavy.
But this is that folding quality that I was talking about, that you're able to the Gigi Guanchuan, the string of pearls, right? It doesn't actually say string of pearls. It translates to like runs through the body, right? That there's this internal connection. A lot of times they talk about a golden thread, right? Which I always think sounds real nice, right? That there's this thing that you're moving, that from the moment you start your commencement and you start moving your arms, there's this thread that you're following, and you can kind of make that thread very linear, right? That's the more yang thing, right? And full. So you're like very much put your hand on the thread, move your hand where the thread goes, right? The other way you can do it is you can feel where that thread is, and you can kind of play with it like a what is those things? Cat's cradle, right? You got the strings between your fingers, and you can move it around, and you can make little adjustments with your fingers. And as long as you keep this bare minimum, connection between the two, you got a lot more room to wiggle and play and fold and open and close and undulate and do all these internal movements. Now, it's a little bit harder to do that, because when you start wiggling and undulating and moving your body, you forget about the thread, right? And that's when people go wet noodle, right? Is they get so into the soft, gushy thing that they lose that thread
integrity.
They lose the thread that links it all together. So again, I mean, he's making it more of a yang and wu thing. I think of it more of a structure and softness thing, because that is what the yang and the wu kind of tend to lean towards. But you could do it in either one, and there are examples.
Sure.
I mean,
it's all still one martial art. So.
This is 1987 when, 99% of the people in the United States probably at that point had never heard of Tai Chi. And the ones that had probably done Chen Man Cheng's form.
So he ends the article by saying this: personally, I am no longer concerned with the distinctions between different Tai Chi Chuan styles as regards push hands and fighting. In all 3 styles, if the practitioner has good personal gung fu, he will be able to evade your attack, throw you across the room, and break your bones with a minimum of physical motion. I have practiced all 3 styles of Tai Chi Chuan and pushed hands with many top people in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and mainland China for over 10 years. I have found that each individual teacher will have some unique fighting and push hand skills. However, it is usually the level of attainment of the practitioner that makes the difference, rather than the style per se. So there you have it.
It's the car that matters, not the driver, right? I mean, it's the driver that matters, not the car, right? So
right, to a certain extent, yeah.
To a large extent, because you can
Right.
talk about inferior fighting methods, right? But like
Most of them are pretty good, though.
yeah, and like an experienced fighter in the lesser art is going to beat
right by
the
far
less experienced fighter in the better art.
Absolutely. So the Tai Chi Chuan Treatise is been our focus for a while now. So now we're at the end of it, where Bai Hua is sort of just reiterating the key points that he thinks are the most valuable. So starting from where we left off, if there is up, there will be down. If there is front, there will be back. And if there is left, there will be right. When you want to bring the opponent to the ground, then your external body actions are contrary to your ultimate goal. In other words, if you want to lift something up, then you should use a counterforce, push it down, make its root break and float. And then you can exert force at the fastest speed to set it off. So this is that idea of you want to lift something up, then first push it down, basically. That's that yin yang. There's always everything that you do as yang has to be supported by yin, that eternal Tai Chi. You never get a straight answer. Everything's got to have a corresponding reverse to whatever you do, basically.
It's equal and opposite, right? Like
equal and opposite. There you go.
Like it's the what do you call it? A seesaw like thing, where if I want you to go up, I gotta put pressure down, right? This is the pung and on energy.
And again, at first he was talking about the root is in the legs and the waist and use of the E, the mind. And now he's just like going through these super core Tai Chi principles that are so preliminary. They're so essential to the practice. Again, this is what you'd hear on the very first day of your Tai Chi training. What Bai Hua says next is that it's better to distinguish between emptiness and solidity. One place has its own emptiness and solidity, and there is always emptiness and solidity everywhere. Make the coordinated body movement in the whole body without any interruption. Yeah, and again, referring to the term Ji Guan Chuan, right. Coordinated body movement, the string of pearls or the string of coins, whatever you want to call that, joint coordination.
Yeah, so this just, we've said this a bunch already, but the empty and full, right? That in order to get this coordinated body movement, you have to be able to move between empty and full seamlessly, right? And so again, it's just your individual parts, right, can be empty and full, right? So your arm can have a full part and an empty part. And you also have to have the sense of your whole body can be empty and full in terms of weightedness. And there's a lot of different aspects to it, but
right. And basically the bottom line is you coordinate all the movement through your body connected without interruption from top to bottom.
That's it.
So again, another Tai Chi classic statement that you're going to hear from literally day one. And so he finishes the entire thing here with a formulation of all the different pieces of Tai Chi. So I guess why not just take a look at these here real quick. So he begins by saying long fist or Tai Chi. Its spirit is like a torrential river flowing continuously. And we talked about that extensively already. And I mean, again, it's self-evident the way it's trained with that continuous uninterrupted flow. He calls it long fist in this case. That's an old name for Tai Chi.
Yeah.
So that's the requirement. And then he lists the techniques. So he says the 13 postures are Peng, Lu, Ji, An, Cai, Lei, Zhou, Cao. He said, this is Ba Gua. He then continues by saying Jin, advancing, Tui, retreating, Gu, shifting left, Pan, shifting right, and Zong Ding, central equilibrium. These are the 5 elements. So he ends by describing how the different techniques of Tai Chi go to the 4 cardinal directions and the 4 diagonals, as well as moving in 5 different directions. It corresponds to the 5 elements of the Wu Sheng, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. So I think those are primarily ways to memorize the techniques and sort of put them into boxes so that you can easily you can remember 7 of them. You're like, I know there was one more because there's 8, like it gives you a way to reference it.
Well, and those are the building blocks for all the other movements. So it kind of gives you this is sort of like the ABCs of it. First you get the movements, then you get the hand motions, then you get the moving the body in a whole, in space.
So like you sort of mix those together, and now you've got a million different options. You can do them, the cardinal techniques as you step to any of different directions.
Yep. You've
off you go.
Immortality.
So through all that, now finally you get to freely act and move using all these different shapes.
Yep.
And that is what Tai Chi is all about.
Sure is. All right, man.
Well, that was fun. Good talking to you.
Made it. All right.
All right. See you next time.
All right.
Bye.
Hey folks, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episodes. Again, just a reminder, check out the Patreon for the extended episodes as well as bonus content, interviews, and more. And again, we're also on Facebook and Instagram and all that. Okay, hope you have a good holiday and take care of yourselves.